Welcome to Creative. This week I'll be interviewing the classical guitarist Ray Burley. Ray's worked with some amazing people and this is a lovely interview, so I really hope you enjoy the show. So today I'm going to be interviewing Raymond Burley, who's a classical guitarist. Hi Ray.
Hi Vic, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, haven't seen you for a while.
No, it's been, yes, yeah, it has been quite a bit of time since I last saw you.
Yeah.
So I always get people to say what they do. I said you're a classical guitarist, but it'd be best for you to introduce what you do. So,
sure.
What is it you do?
Probably the only thing I don't do is compose. I do a lot of playing, a lot of arranging of music for solo guitar, duo, trio, ensembles. And that's probably one of my passions, arranging. And I've had lots of stuff published, and there's still things to come out, which is always great. And that's one way I've made use of the lockdown to arrange a lot of stuff.
Yes, yes. I'm sure we're going to talk about strategies for self-imprisonment. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you start? What was your first sort of connection with music?
I started when I was about 10, I think, all those years ago, pre-war. I had a guitar for Christmas, I think, or a birthday. I'm not really sure, but and I'm not even sure why. I think pop music at the time, strumming chords, just got into it that way. My cousin played the guitar a bit. I don't think he was a great player looking back on it. Again, he was a chord strummer. He showed me where to put two fingers and said, this is a chord of E minor. And that was how I got going.
Yeah.
And generally wasted time for a good number of years playing in rock bands and then in function bands. And then somebody asked me one day, had I heard of Segovia? And I hadn't. That lent me an EP of Segovia. And I can say it was a revelation, but I'm afraid I can't, because I listened to it and I thought, I don't like it very much. And I thought, well, everybody's telling me Segovia is wonderful and the music he's playing is fantastic. I should like it. And I kept playing this stuff. And eventually I did get to like it. And I was in my local music shop in Reading, where I was living at the time, and thumbing through some guitar music. And I found one of the pieces on this EP that Segovia was playing. I thought, arrogantly, if he can play it, I can do it. So I took it home, not able to read a note of music. So I waded through it sort of bar by bar, note by note. And eventually I could actually play this thing. I mean, looking back on it, it was probably terrible. But I was so chuffed that I could actually do this. And that gave me a sort of kickstart into classical guitar. But I was playing electric guitar and classical guitar side by side for 10 years, I should think.
Right.
And the last thing I did on electric guitar was on tour on Jesus Christ Superstar. I had a phone call asking me if I would play guitar in Jesus Christ Superstar. So I said, well, how long do you want me for? They said, can you do 7 months? I said, no, I can't do 7 weeks. I think I did 6 weeks, and then somebody else took over. And the day after the last gig with Superstar, I played a classical concert at Eton College. So it was quite a strange existence at the time.
So because you've covered that really, really, really well. There's so much stuff in there I want to sort of talk to you about.
Sure.
Because, obviously I had a similar experience with classical and electric. And of course, I went the other way.
Uh-huh.
I got to the point of thinking, well, I've got to focus on one of these because, there's not enough hours in the day.
Exactly.
Yeah, to do both. And I'd met somebody who was a friend of mine who was a really super classical player, but a really good electric player. And he was the one who really got me into playing classical, because he said, look, if you can play classical, the dedication and stuff, if you get that, then you turn that to the electric as well. I mean, that's something I thought, well, if that's working for him.
Of course.
To the point of thinking, well, hang on a minute, I couldn't get the electric guitar to help the classical, but I could get the classical to help the electric.
Oh yeah.
So for me, that was the decision. It was like, I could still play classical and play electric, but I couldn't do it the other way around. That's how So that was my journey. But for you, that must have been, you got to that point where you went, because I'm quite intrigued that you heard Segovia and it was like, okay, and so
yeah, that's right.
Which I find interesting, because normally when you hear something like Segovia or John Williams or Bream or whatever, it's that moment of like, oh my God,
yeah,
that's incredible.
I'm afraid it wasn't. No. By the time I'd finished or got towards the end of my electric playing, I was listening to people like Joe Pass, Jim Hall, Barney Kessel, mainly jazzers.
Yeah.
Eric Clapton, I quite liked. Jimi Hendrix didn't have much an effect on me. Most people say, "Oh, Jimi Hendrix came along and changed everything." For me, I'd sort of almost left that style of playing behind. I did quite a lot of recording in London. I met the Beatles a few times through session playing, and lots of other stars, if you like, at the time.
Let's put that back, because there's so much stuff here.
Sorry about that.
Let's go back and have a look at what you were doing with the electric guitar. So when you started off, then you'd got a guitar bought for you. Was that an acoustic guitar?
Yes, it was a steel strung acoustic.
Yeah, so you started playing, and obviously you were sort of inspired just by seeing somebody playing some chords, because this happened to me as well, actually. Yeah. And then once you get those chords down, you realise, actually, I've gone further than this person already.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that's quite a typical story. You're suddenly like you're overwhelmed at how wonderful they are, and then you realise, oh my goodness, this is really So you get to that point. So what then starts to inspire you to play? Because I think there must be there's often something that starts to motivate.
Yeah, I said such a long time ago. I was pretty like the Shadows.
Yeah.
Which I think most of us of our era did, and I still do. Every now and again I listen to the Shadows on YouTube. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Because they were not following anybody's lead. They came from nowhere.
Yeah.
I suppose in the similar way that the Beatles did, and the same way that Segovia did to a certain extent. They weren't following anybody's path. They were creating their own. Yeah. And look what they did.
Exactly.
But one of the possible problems I could have had when I started was I'm left-handed. My cousin, who showed me these few chords, was right-handed, so I didn't question it. I just played right-handed, and have ever since. Never ever considered turning it around and playing backwards.
Well, that's interesting, because that's one of the sort of issues I've often had, because if people come to me and they've never played and they're left-handed, I actually encourage them to play right-handed, because it's one of these things you think, well, the only problem is just getting a guitar that's left-handed.
Yeah.
Really difficult. And I sort of explain to them why.
Yeah.
But also, of course, if your left hand's your predominant hand anyway, it's probably an advantage, actually.
Yeah.
To play it, conventionally.
Yeah. And of course, I didn't consider any of that.
Yeah, having to go through the Hendrix or the, Albert King thing of playing the guitar the wrong way around.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, because there's a couple of really good players that I've taught who are playing right-handed but are actually left-handed.
Yeah.
And I think they found it to be a benefit, actually.
Yes. Yeah. But I played in duo for many years with John Mills, who is left-handed.
And did he play left-handed?
Nope.
No, he plays right-handed. Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's interesting.
Yeah, so that's the problems of having a decent guitar made for a left-handed player. You try selling it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Big problems.
Yeah, totally. I could, and even if you're having a guitar made for you, it's not so bad, is it? But but for me, it's definitely been that sort of point that I didn't have a problem with that, and I've always been somebody who likes picking up guitars, finding something on the market and fixing it or whatever. And of course, if you're left-handed, it's like, you're back in that one again, aren't you? So
no, it's more trouble than it's worth.
So you're getting into that thing. You started playing.
Yeah.
And when do you get to that point where you start to think, actually, I'm pretty good at this?
Well, I like to think I was a pretty good electric guitarist.
I'm sure you were.
I mean, I could always play by ear and always had a very good ear. And if I listened to a record and it was slightly out of tune, it was painful. I don't have perfect pitch, and I wouldn't want perfect pitch.
Oh, no.
But bad pitch, pitching with singers, or guitarists playing with one string out of tune, annoys me intensely. And I was very keen on tuning and able to. I can still now just listen to something and play it pretty easily. That was never a problem. But of course, if you're ripping off somebody's solos on electric guitar, it's quite a handy thing to be able to do.
Of course, anything you learned on the electric guitar back in the day, you had to work out.
Of course.
Because none of the music books were accurate. I mean, they're all in the wrong key. If at all. And I was actually talking to Chaz Hodges, Chaz and Dave.
Yeah, of course.
And because we did quite a lot of work together, mostly, with Blues Camp.
Yeah.
And I was really interested in his story, because he was, before me. I was saying, you had to work everything out of records, and because he had to get the records.
Of course.
And we're back to the old story of, and this is why obviously these bands and people appeared in places that had ports. Because to find somebody who was in the Merchant Navy who'd bring back, a blues album or a rock and roll album or whatever, to work it out. Obviously, I could more or less get those albums, but he was saying that it was that, and also then going around to somebody who had a television. So if Lonnie Donegan was on the TV, everybody went round to see how's he playing that. And I thought that was brilliant.
We've got it so easy these days.
Actually, I think probably to the detriment of people learning.
Possibly, yeah.
Because you see, you saying about having a good ear. If you listen to any of those players, the electric players, they had to have a good ear.
Of course. Yeah.
How else were they going to be able to work something out?
Yeah. But of course, we spent ages copying somebody's solo, and then if you went to hear them live, they play a different solo. Same with the jazzers. You sit and copy a Joe Pass solo, and then the following week you play something completely different. Well, that's what it's all about.
So, hang on, I just I just lost you there. It's my fault.
Don't worry.
Yeah, this is one of the problems running this
back.
I occasionally get things flipping up.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got this. Now you've mentioned a lot of jazzers already, and a lot of these, are, some of them are directly influenced by classical guitar, Jim Hall particularly.
Yeah.
But obviously, Joe Pass's playing has got that sort of very intricate thing. I knew a little bit more about Barney Kessel because I was lucky enough to meet him.
Yeah.
And because he used to come and do this thing called the Effective Guitarist, which was one of Morris Summerfield's
Yeah.
used to run.
Mm.
And they did like a 4-day course about his the psychological aspects of what he did.
Yeah.
So quite interesting. So where did you pick up on that? You know, these players and presumably the style, because I'm sure this was feeding into what you were doing on the electric guitar.
Yeah. I think just buying records or borrowing records of these people, I put them on, either liked them or I didn't. But Joe Pass sort of knocked me sideways when I first heard him.
Yeah, was it the Virtuoso albums? Because he had
the one particularly was for Django. Wonderful.
Yeah.
But I liked him when he was playing with a pick rather than fingers. I mean, it was all very well. I mean, he was able to play on his own with the chord stuff and right-hand fingers rather than a pick. But when he was playing with a pick, I just thought it was phenomenal. So clean and speed when he needed it, and just amazing.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
And an interesting guy, actually.
Yeah.
I remember there was some sort of thing where I think it was at a college or something doing a masterclass, and somebody in the audience says, "Could you tell us about some altered chord, massive A7 sharp 9 flat something like that?" And Joe Pass went, "Well, it's A7." All this sort of complexity just sort of funny out the window. It was amazing.
Because Ivor Morantz was a good friend of mine, and he introduced me to a lot of players. And I was at his house one day because I recorded a CD of Ivor's music, and the phone rang. Ivor was in the kitchen making a cup of tea or something, and he said, "Can you get the phone?" And I got it was George Benson. And,
Fantastic. How did you meet Ivor Morantz?
I'd known him for a number of years through going to the shop, trying guitars, and actually bought a couple of guitars from him. But then, completely out of the blue, he asked me if I would record a CD of his music. He came to see me at a concert at the Wigmore Hall, I think. I played a concert with John Mills, and he came up, because Ivor was great. He'd come up with a program and say, "Oh, that piece was terrible. That was wonderful. Oh, you shouldn't be playing that rubbish." He was a great critic. And then one day he phoned me up and said, "Would I be interested in recording a CD of his music?" I assumed it would be jazz or jazz style, but a lot of it wasn't. It was pretty much classical. And the company that was due to bring it out for some reason didn't. Now, whether they didn't like the music, whether they didn't like me, I don't know. But the recording never came out. And I've still got those old recordings on cassette.
Amazing. I mean, obviously nowadays it would be quite easy to get that stuff out, wouldn't it?
Probably, but of course he's not with us anymore, so nobody to get permission from. But
well, no.
But he was a good friend, and
yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? So we've jumped a little bit from where your electric guitar playing and classical. So where do you start focusing on the classical? Because obviously for guitarists, we all know that there has to become that crunch point where you go, no, this is where I'm going.
Yeah.
Because it's such a dedicated instrument, classical guitar.
Absolutely, yeah.
Where does that come?
I didn't start playing classical exclusively until I was about 23. And I had a teacher in London because in those days, who do you go to for lessons?
Exactly.
And I think it was a name that was recommended to me. And it was a guy called Alexis Chesnikov, who most people have never heard of.
Right.
But he was Julian Bream's first teacher.
Oh.
And I would go from Reading to Earl's Court, where he lived, every Wednesday or whatever it was. And he would give me an hour lesson that lasted about 3.5 hours. And he just said, things are going very well. Time to move on to another teacher. And I went to 2 or 3 other teachers. Some were good, some were not so good, I thought, in my naive way. And then I suppose after that, it was experience rather than going to a teacher. I did it on my own and hoped for the best.
Oh, obviously works.
I think generally it did, yeah. Because at that point, I mean, in the early days of classical playing, my sight reading was virtually non-existent. So it was a real struggle to get the notes off the page.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, again, it was probably BMG magazine, Gilbert Barbarian was asking for players to join his Omega group. So I had no idea what they did, but it sounded like a good idea. So I phoned him up and he said, yes, come for an audition. So I went to his house in Golders Green and he said, can you play something? And I played a couple of little Lobos studies and things. And he said, oh, yeah, playing's good. Can I give you a sight reading test? And I think the phone rang or something before I had a chance to play this. And he said, okay, you're in the group. We rehearse every Thursday, whatever it was, come along. And he gave me this pad of music, and there's no hope that I was going to be able to play this stuff within a week or 2 weeks, whatever it was. And he called me aside after the first rehearsal. He said, your sight reading's not very good, is it? I said, well, no. He said, if you go away and work on it for a couple of months, come back, you're in the group, which is what I did. I worked like stink on my sight reading, which I would recommend anybody do because it's such an important tool to have.
Yes.
And I was in the group. I was with them for 18 months, 2 years, whatever it was, until the group disbanded.
I want to focus on that because that's a really interesting point. Because again, you know, we've got one of these sort of catch-22 situations, haven't we? Mm-hmm. To have a good ear, then it tends to mean that the reading is not very good.
Absolutely, yeah.
Once you've got a good ear, it always makes it difficult to learn to read because there's always that ability to be able to just know where it's going to be.
Yeah.
And then you get the opposite of that, where people can be really good readers and their ear isn't as good.
Yeah.
Because again, if you could read something, you know, so there is definitely a conflict. Mm. So there's a story that I remember reading. I think it was Jimmy Page. It was Jimmy Page and also Steve Lukather. Yeah. Same thing about getting involved in session work.
Yeah. And
then realising that they needed to read. Because obviously Jimmy Page's thing was because he could play like this, and this, he could sound like Jimmy Reed or whatever. Yeah. You know, people would go like, you got to come in and do this. But then he realised that if he could read, he could make even more money doing all this other stuff.
Absolutely.
And that was the motivator. It was like, you know, if I could do this, I can earn more money. And it was the same thing with Steve Lukather, apparently.
Yeah.
So I think it does require for guitarists somehow, because we didn't, you know, unless you started off, because I interviewed Amanda Cook.
Yes, I know Amanda. Yeah, know her very well.
So obviously with Amanda, she started playing classical guitar and it's always there with you. And if you start on a musical instrument like the violin or whatever, it's always there's the music, and you can read it. And and it's part of the way it develops.
Yeah.
But there's lots of things about the guitar that just don't lend itself to music reading unless you go all in with it.
Yeah. But I'm currently writing a book about sight reading.
Good, because there's very little out there that's any good, right? You know.
Yeah, the publisher's already lined up. It's just a question of me finishing it, which is the problem.
We received with great, you know, gusto. Because what tends to happen with those books is they start off and it's all very easy, and then you turn the page and it's like there's like 50 pages missing.
Yeah, no, this is not like that at all.
No, but
it's not a book of lots and lots of examples, because the thing about that is that you play one of the examples, play it a second time, it's not sight reading anymore.
Of course it is.
So there's lots of little sort of 8-bar melodies pointing out things to look for, etc.
That's
very steadily.
Yeah, because I haven't seen anything like that.
No.
So that's really good. Yeah.
But going back to the thing, you know, the thing of a guitarist reading, the classic example in UK would be Jim Sullivan.
Yeah.
Who, you know, was on something like 3,000 pop records.
Exactly.
Because he could read. You know, he could play in virtually any style well, and he could read. So what more do you need?
Totally.
Yeah.
Good. That's really good. So anyway, so we got to that bit. We got now the start where the classical guitarist
the next question is, when did you sort of get to that point of going, yeah, this is what I'm doing, totally,
Yeah.
you know, and it's working for me?
Yeah. Again, I think it's probably listening to records, you know, certain things, certain styles of music that I listen to. But I suppose the guitarist that I was most impressed, I suppose, was John Williams in the early days. And he's now a good friend. Julian Bream too. You know, both completely different types of player, but for certain types of music, they're both phenomenal. You know, I've not heard anybody top it. Bream's imagination, John's technique, make one player out of the two.
Yes. Well, that's what was interesting about when they did a few duet albums, didn't they?
Yeah, yes.
And I always thought that was interesting because you could really tell them apart, if you see what I mean.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know,
but they weren't trying to set any standards. So they were friends that played together.
Yeah.
And that's what you got, and it did very well for them too.
Yeah, yeah. So what? Because we haven't actually sort of quoted years and stuff like that. You know what, roughly. But I mean, when did sort of what year would you say you became like, I'm now the classical guitar player? So we just get a little bit of a landmark.
Oh, let me think. It's difficult to say. I mean, early 70s, I'm guessing. But I mentioned this thing of doing Superstar. That was 1990, I think. And there was this big period in the middle where I'd never even picked up an electric guitar, because when I did Superstar, I had to borrow a Fender Strat and an amp, because I didn't own one.
Right.
So I had about a week to get the technique going again. And a score like that is written. I mean, there's a little bit of improvisation, but generally it's a written part. So just to get on and do it.
Yeah, yeah. So what then? Because I know you've played with lots of different people and all this stuff. So let's start to get some of these the little the map of, you know, the timeline. So who did you start, you know, working with, or were they sort of solo concerts when you started, and where were they?
Solo concerts. Well, I said I was living in Reading at the time and around that area, and I was always attracted to playing with other people, probably from the electric guitar days. But the first person I spent most time playing with was John Mills. I think John phoned me up one day and said that he was looking for a piece of music or something. And I did have that music, and I sent it to him. And he said, oh, we should get together and play something. And we did. And it was though we'd been playing together for years, from the very first time we played together. And that doesn't happen very often.
No.
You can play with somebody for years and years and years, and it never feels right. And another player is John Feely, Irish guitarist. Exactly the same thing happened. We played together. And if we got together today, it would be as though we'd never stopped playing together. Others, so you can play with.
Yeah, I find that fascinating. You just sort of resonate with a particular person.
But it's quite rare.
Yeah, it is rare. And you know, for me, they tend to be the type of people that you sort of stick with as well.
Exactly. Yeah. John Feely and I did a CD of Mertz and Saw for a company in the States. And John was supposed to come to me about a week before to rehearse before we went off to the studio, or church as we recorded it. And for some reason, whether he was ill or not, but he arrived the day before the recording. We sat down, played the whole program through one afternoon, went into the studio the following day and recorded it. And the engineer said, you must be crazy. He said, this is not going to work at all. It's suicidal. We're never going to get anything out of this. Complete waste of time. And we did the whole session in 2 days. And because we knew each other's playing. And I would move and play near the Ridge Ponticello. He would do exactly the same without even following me. We just did it instinctively.
Yeah.
And again, that's such a rare thing to be able to do.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It was crazy on reflection. It was a stupid thing to do, but we got away with it.
Yeah, I think that you do. You do have things like that happen artistically.
Mm.
And again, because I'm always intrigued by, we try to sort of make reasons and have a logical, map that sort of says this and this and this and this.
Yeah.
But then music, always with art, something you're confounded by something that happens. It's completely the opposite of what you expected.
Mm.
Obviously playing within a band, my experience of that would be, you're working with somebody and you do something that matches the feel that the drummer's doing.
Yeah.
And that was like not rehearsed, nothing,
Yeah.
and then something else will happen together.
Yeah.
And I always think it was similar to, I had some involvement with Indian music earlier on, and the way that they communicate with one another. Music, somebody will play something and somebody will copy that figure that somebody's played over here. And then this communication starts. And you get that sort of thing where you both say the same thing at the same time, like happens in conversation sometimes.
Of course.
It is the thing that really inspires me about music. It's like, well, there's something going on here that I don't know what's going on, but it's sort of magical.
Yeah, because one of the groups I play in until recently was 4 parts guitar with Gordon Giltrap, Clive Carroll, and John Etheridge.
Oh wow!
So you got 4 players, 4 different styles, but we would play duos within the group together, solos. So I'm playing something with Clive. Next thing I'm playing something with John Etheridge, and then with Gordon. All different styles, but it's just a joy because of that spontaneity. We would do a tour of 20 gigs up and down the country, and every night would be different.
Yeah, that's amazing. That sounds like a gig and a half, really.
Oh, it is, yeah. And the audience reaction was just phenomenal.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, well, that's
Gordon became ill. Gordon became ill, and then we had to shelve it. But,
right.
But we keep talking about getting it back together, so that's what we do.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
So that sounds like a really good thing to get back on the road once you're.
Oh, it's amazing.
Once we're all sort of let out of our houses.
Your picture is frozen at the moment.
Yeah, well, don't worry about that. It's okay.
Okay.
It's fine with the recording, so it'll be good. Good. So we're talking about this sort of playing. So you met John Mills. I mean, that's quite an interesting person to start working with, because John.
Oh yeah, John's a good friend and a great player.
When I was learning classical guitar, I mean, his I can't remember what it was called now. Was it called repertoire book? Yeah.
That was music of the student repertoire, I think. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. I've still got that book, but it's in bits. It's so much. I mean, it was a brilliant book.
Yeah.
But he was well known then. So you must have, for him to have contacted you, you must have been doing quite a lot of stuff before meeting John.
Oh yeah. I've been playing with lots of other people, playing solo, and always looking for new repertoire. I mean, one thing I can't stand is players that just play the same repertoire for year after year after year. I'm always looking for interesting material. But I mean, we say the guitar repertoire is small. It's not. It's always huge. But of course, not all that music suits your style. So it's finding music that suits your approach and your style and your sound. I don't play very contemporary music. Because it's finding an audience that will listen to it as much as anything.
Yes.
I mean, playing that sort of music is fine for your own amusement or your own fulfillment, but an audience, not so great. Well, it depends where you're playing and who you're playing to. Guitarists will probably listen to anything because you're a guitarist and they're interested in the instrument as much as anything. But a non-guitar or even a non-musical audience, I think you might struggle.
Yeah. So I just want to sort of pick up on something you said there. You were obviously doing a lot of playing.
Yeah.
So how will you get in those type of gigs? Because it's not quite the same as just going and playing a local, a local.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no.
So you're quite good at getting classical guitar gigs, if you want it.
Yeah, I think in the early days I did a few charity things and that sort of stuff just for the experience of playing.
Right.
I've had a few agents over the years, some good, some not so good. Had a very good one in America who eventually retired, and I was over there quite a lot. And I also used to work in a duo and trio with Alice Harts in New York. So I was in New York quite a lot, which was also a good experience. And I met a lot of good friends, and I'm still in touch with them. With Skype and email and everything else, it's very easy to keep in touch. I should have been in New York this year, but that's now been moved to next year. So, like everything else, I was supposed to be in South America, in Finland, in Ireland, but that's all been shelved.
I think there's a lot of what's going on at the moment, isn't it? That it's not like they've gone away; it's just they've moved.
Exactly.
I think
Yeah.
a lot of people are going to have such ridiculously busy years.
That's right.
Because there'll be everything that's been moved from this year, plus everything else that was lined up.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
But
Cool.
yeah, so with this then, you're obviously doing a lot of legwork to get these sort of gigs and stuff. I'm assuming that you must have had a lot of contacts from your days of playing electric guitar, or you just sort of knew the ropes a bit.
Most of the contacts I had from when I was playing electric, now I don't. We're not in contact anymore. In fact, a lot of the people I played with, I can't even remember their names.
No, but what I'm saying, for you to go and be able to do a lot of classical playing, you either knew how to do it. It wasn't like you were starting from scratch, if you see what I mean. It wasn't like you came out of music college or something and you thought, right now I've got to start, getting on the circuit.
Yeah.
Like you sort of knew where you got your name around and everything.
I suppose so, but I suppose I would consider myself to be quite lazy. Rather than going out and getting gigs, I would wait for them to come to me.
Oh, that's interesting.
It seemed to work quite well.
Right. Okay. So I'm quite intrigued by this. So there must have been something that you were doing that got that. Because for a lot of people, wouldn't happen, would it? So
Yeah, I suppose you're right. Yeah.
So
it's just contacts.
What your secret is, right?
And so I'm quite lazy. I just wait for them to come to me. And it's worked pretty well so far.
Yeah, obviously has. So you obviously arranged a lot. I know you arranged a lot of your own material. Or you arrange material for the guitar.
Yeah.
And presumably that started quite early on.
It did, yeah. That was a long time ago. Somebody asked me if I would arrange a Spanish piece for 2 guitars, and I can't even think what it was now, which I did, and it seemed to go quite well. And I sort of got the bug, really, and arranged lots of things. Because I do some weekend courses, guitar ensemble courses, or even guitar ensemble days, and send the music out in advance. And off we go, and rehearse through it, and end up with a concert in the evening. And there's always sort of deadlines to get things ready for, and publishers as well. I've got 3 publishers that are taking things from me at the moment. I've got about 35 or 40 books in print at the moment, and still more coming. Right. It's the same with CDs, and I've done 25 CDs. And it's always looking for new things to record, and knowing what people want these days.
Okay. I want to pick you up on something. You said that you always thought you were a bit lazy. I don't think having 30 or 30 odd books in print and CDs and stuff makes you out to be lazy. So I'm quite intrigued. You must have a way of just getting down and doing stuff in.
Well,
you don't feel that. There's a bit of when I'm speaking. So it seems as if you're able to just do stuff without having to think about it. You don't get worked up about it. You just do stuff and get on with it.
Yeah, I think I've always been that way. Like if there's a day I don't want to practice, I don't practice. Obviously if you've got a concert tomorrow, you practice today. But and the deadlines are great for getting you fired up. But if there's a day when I don't want to practice, I don't practice. Because I think you have to be in the mood and have to want to achieve something when you're practicing. And what I always do, and I would suggest everybody does, is when you start a practice session, decide what you want to come out the other end with. There's no point in practice and practice and practice. Give yourself a deadline, a realistic deadline. Because if you play, the worst thing to do is if you've got 8 hours to practice, is to practice for 8 hours. It's maybe an hour, then have an hour off, another hour, and so on. But it depends on the individual. We all learn at a different rate. That's the thing, when you're a teacher, you can't expect all your pupils to progress at the same rate.
Yeah. That's so true. That's so true. I like what you're saying there, because I think that one of the problems with practice is it's sort of intangible. It's not like you're painting a picture. So after 4 hours, that's what you've done.
Yeah.
So practice, it's like, well, it's gone. It's evaporated.
Yeah.
And you don't always get the result until maybe tomorrow.
Yes, exactly.
Or next week or whatever. But sort of having a way of being able to, I suggest people make a list of what it is that they're doing. It's all achievable. Not to say that they're going to learn X. It might be just to play X. Or whatever. And then just do that in order to create some sort of forward motion. And I totally agree that, sometimes having a break in a practice session is part of the practice time.
Of course. Yeah.
Ideas have to sort of percolate and
exactly.
Yeah. So this is interesting, and it is a very strange phenomenon, that, because with learning a musical instrument, you learn a lot about your mind. Yeah. Don't you? Because that's basically all. It's it's your mind and your muscle memory and all the rest of it. Yeah. And all those sort of when you say to people, well, so what's music then? Because when you actually start looking at it, it's like, well, if that's a mental thing, just learning out to do, and you could apply that to learning a language or learning how to do something completely different. So
any sort of skill.
Yeah. So all of those things. Then it comes down to, so what is the music bit then? If there's the muscle memory bit, and then there's the how we learn stuff. So I think it's an interesting point. And then once you start, as you say, everybody's got a different way of learning.
Of course, yeah.
Everybody's got, for some people, they like to just spend ages doing something, and somebody else, like me, I'm a bit of a butterfly. I have to do a little bit and go on.
Yeah. But I mean, I think you should always judge practice sessions by what comes out the other end. I mean, if you play for an hour and it sounds exactly the same as when you started, that hour's wasted.
Just totally. That's it. So that's a really good point. I like it because nobody's actually spoken about that type of thing before.
Right.
So that's really good.
Yeah. Because if you're playing sorry, I was going to say.
I'm fascinated. So I want to talk a little bit about when you're doing your ensemble work. It's say it's easy. It's easy when you're. It's easier when you're on your own to focus your mind on what it is that you want as your outcome.
Yeah.
Right. How do you get around that when it's an ensemble?
Okay. Again, that depends on who your partner is, I think. I mean, if you take, for example, Gordon Giltrap, who I played with, 15 years, I should think, on and off. When Gordon and I get together, we never rehearse. We sit down and we play, and that's it. Again, we've got this thing that we can just go straight in and do it. And if we don't see each other for a couple of years, we can just meet. And so we've never stopped. and it's brilliant. And he said the big advantage from my point of view, or the big plus, is it's a different style again. I don't have a chance to get bored.
No.
Which if you play exclusively classical concerts, you do, or I find I do. But to then work with John Etheridge or with Clive Carroll, and all different players, different styles, different approaches, different sound. Wonderful. Keeps you fresh.
Yes. Yeah. So with Gordon's work then, so do you arrange your parts?
Yes.
Or do you...
The way it worked was we met, it was actually an RGT, one of the conference days. We ended up sitting opposite each other at the meal table. And he knew of me, I knew of him, but we didn't really know what each other did. And he said, well, why don't we play together? And he came over to me, and I think we sat cross-legged on the floor and just busked through some stuff. And it worked like a charm, because a lot of people said, well, steel and nylon's not going to work at all. But I worked for many years with a harpsichordist, which is exactly the same style, the same approach, steel and nylon. And I was pretty sure it would work. And it did, and I think I arranged a concert for us, and that worked well, and we carried on. We've done Purcell rooms, we did a DVD, we've done a CD, and the way it works with my parts, of course, Gordon's parts are solos. So what I do is write a part to key in with what he's playing. It's the closest I ever get to composition. But then I've got a sort of blueprint to fit my notes too, so it's not composition as such. I suppose it's a form of arranging, creative arranging. And then it fits together. Or maybe it doesn't, but mostly it does. And that again is good fun.
Yeah, I bet it is good fun.
And we get on very well anyway.
Yeah, he's a nice guy, isn't he? So, yeah. So good. So what were your plans before we had to shelve everything?
Well, so a lot of concerts abroad.
Where did you have lined up?
Festival in Ireland, concert series in Finland, working with a singer in New York. What else was I doing? I can't remember what else I was doing. Oh, South America, Peru. And one of the things that at the moment is still on is a recording with an Italian guitarist, Antonio De Innocentis, which we're recording in Naples at the end of August. So at the moment that's still on. So fingers crossed.
Yeah. As well. Sounds good. So with these, because you're working with so many different people, are they sort of contacting you?
Well, the one with in Italy with Antonio is John Duart music that's either rarely recorded or not recorded at all. There's a couple of CDs coming out of his music. And Chris Duart, his son, is organising all that, so I just turn up and do it.
Yeah.
Which is nice. And I've got a solo CD to do in January, all of Segovia repertoire.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
We'll bring you around full circle then.
Yeah, it is, yeah. It's called the Segovia Legacy, and I've chosen a whole set of pieces that Segovia played and recorded, and one that he wrote. And that's going ahead, well, it was supposed to be the middle of this year, and of course that's been shelved, so that's now happening in January.
Okay, so but the question here is, when did you actually then get to the point of listening to Segovia and thinking, yeah, he's all right?
I don't think it was Segovia so much as the music he happened to be playing at the time that I didn't find very inspiring. Whereas John Williams' music, John Williams playing really, just fired me immediately. I thought it was very, sounded very confident, like the music he was playing, and like the sound he was producing.
Yeah.
I'm not so keen on his sound now because of the change of guitar he's using. He's using a guitar that I'm not much of a fan of, put it that way.
Right.
But the Segovia, is what I'm trying to do with this is play music that was written for him and say recorded by him, but not in his style. In no way am I trying to copy his playing style, his sound, even if I could, because I think things have moved on. Because he was perhaps criticised for his very eccentric, perhaps, interpretations, and pretty much the same sort of approach. I mean, I'll probably get shot down for saying this. Pretty much the same sort of approach, whether it's playing contemporary music or Baroque music, which these days we tend not to do.
No, but I think a lot of things have changed in the playing, because
of course, yeah,
Maurice Segovia was, sort of arrived on the scene. Classical guitar was not that. It goes in cycles, obviously. The history of guitar, isn't it? You get a period of time when the guitar is a popular instrument, then it sort of almost disappears.
That's right.
And it's difficult for us in the 20th century, well, 21st century, but even in the 20th century, to look at that and realise that that's the case, because of obviously like the electric guitar as well, the acoustic guitar.
Yeah,
it's like it's everywhere. The guitar is absolutely everywhere, but of course it wasn't like that.
No.
And of course Segovia appeared at a time when the guitar was re-emerging, I think.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, and the way...
He was a 20th century player, but playing in a sort of 19th century way.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously now the guitar is the how can I put this, the legacy of the guitar has sort of changed a little bit, because there was enough people out there playing it, and people can, like with the piano, you get somebody who's an expert at a particular, you get somebody who's a Beethoven expert, or
exactly, yeah,
or Chopin, whatever, so somebody like Brendel, Alfred Brendel, or John Lill or whatever, and they think, well, there's their expertise area.
Sure.
They'll play other things, but that's the thing that they'll be recognised as being. And now there's more of that, with guitar. You would go like, okay, this guy does this, but of course at the time maybe that wasn't maybe so much the point. It was just like just play something.
That's right. Get the instrument out there.
Yeah.
But I mean, as guitarists, until fairly recently, I think we were trying to cover about 400 years of music in one concert program. Which, as you say, a pianist would never do that. They specialise. And I think in terms of recordings now, CDs, although CDs are on their way out, perhaps, is to have a link, have some sort of connection. All Baroque music, or all Spanish music, or all one composer, which is why I did the Segovia thing, because there is the link. Everything that Segovia played.
Yes. So just briefly, because you're playing obviously quite a wide, guitar repertoire. Well, it is very wide.
Yeah.
What, if any, areas are you naturally drawn towards?
Okay. The desert island thing. I suppose it's Baroque music, Bach. But then I think
you've got JS on your wall behind you, haven't you? Is it?
That's right. My hero. I've played so much Bach over the years, and I could play the same piece over and over and over again for years, and just never get tired of it, because you can keep coming up with a different approach. And this is, in some ways, the downside of recording or publishing, that it fixes something. Yes, and I think particularly Baroque music can't be fixed. It can be different every time. And the slower the movement, like a saraband or something, or even a prelude, there's so much room for your own interpretation in terms of ornaments and tempos and things. And to fix something sort of goes against everything that is for me.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. So, a question, just to wrap up there. What if you wanted to give yourself a younger version of yourself advice?
Yeah.
What would you have said, or what would you say to a younger you?
I think it's doing it. Just experience. You can go to a teacher. It can be a very good teacher, but often they don't understand your playing if you're with them for a shortish time. And this is the thing about, you go to summer school and there might be 5 or 6 different teachers there, and you play your piece to one teacher and then play it to another teacher, and you've got 4 or 5 different advice for the same piece. Ultimately, it's you, the player, that has to make the decisions. And you may make wrong decisions, but that's experience. That's what experience is. making mistakes and learning from them.
Yes, good, good advice. Anyway, that was lovely speaking to you. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, and you, Vic.
I was saying to somebody the other day, everything, you get to a certain age and everything seems to be 5 years ago, but
unfortunately not.
No, and I think it seems like 5 years ago when I saw you, but it probably wasn't.
I have no idea. But you're looking well.
Well, I'm still there, so I'm quite
absolutely.
Happy. You're looking good. So best luck with everything that you're doing, and
thanks, Vic.
Hopefully we'll catch up at some point.
I hope so too, and thanks for the opportunity to do this. That's great. It's good fun.
It's been really good fun.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed talking to Ray. It's been a long time, and he's such a good player. It's really interesting to see somebody who, although obviously you can tell from the interview that Ray spent a lot of time playing electric guitar, but he's a really, really fine classical player, and it was so interesting getting those sort of insights in his story. So anyway, till next time.